Hi, welcome to this short presentation and demonstration of our AWS on DevOps courseware. My name is Dennis. I helped create some of the course as well as the partial instructoring as well. This is really about bootcamping and bootstrapping all of you into learning what this is about and what you'll be teaching over the course of the cohort. So let's get started. First and foremost, we'll have our set of foundations. So what is happening in the 6-month cohort is that in part-time at least, you'll have foundations of Linux, AWS, Python, Enterprise DevOps, as well as the AWS Academy Cloud Solutions Architecting, as well as the DevOps and SysOps certification equivalent courseware. In between, halfway, you'll also have what we have is capstones that the students will go through, and then ultimately they'll have that capstone project at the near end upon graduation. But let's walk through the actual spreadsheet a little bit further and dig deep into this. So what happens is on week 1, you'll start everyone off with Linux foundations. Linux is misspelled. I do apologize for that. But anyways, depending on your cohort, you might have day 1, day 2, and day 3, and you'll have 3 days a week on there. So that's a Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, or that might be a Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. 3 hours for each day, days 1 and 2, and days 3 on your weekend, depending on which cohort you have, will be a 4-hour day. So you'll have that time. How you should actually approach this is that when you think about the amount of time you spend, you should be spending roughly 1/2 to 2/3 of your time instructing and leading. Now, remember that the students are not required to actually read the material ahead of time. For those of you who are migrating instructors from other cohorts or other courseware types, there used to be pre-reading requirements and pre-lecture requirements. Now that it's not the case in this cohort. However, we do have reading material for them that they can catch up and get ahead on. So depending on your instructional requirements and how your class is moving, you may want to go ahead and speed up on certain weeks to help them get ahead and stay ahead. And it really depends on your class. So you're in charge of that instruction. Next, you have to think about that we go through things like class instructions, setting up VMware or VirtualBox, depending on what their use case requirements are. And then some of them who don't have those hardware requirements, you might still have them have AWS free tier accounts and then utilize the EC2 consoles from there if necessary. So day 1, we start off with that basic setup and introductions, and then you really hit it hard in the first week, days 2 and day 3, where they get into core system commands. You'll have access to this schedule as well. This is a sample schedule, and you'll have concepts like what is an OS, kernel versus user mode, hardware, how they interact and work. And the reason why we do that, even though you might be teaching for DevOps, is because you need to understand that deep level systems engineering to help support DevOps as a culture, as well as the practical hands-on skills when you need to troubleshoot something. So that gets better over time. The first 3 weeks will be probably the most difficult for a lot of instructors, especially for students who don't have technical backgrounds. So make sure you give them extra guidance and work with your IA if you have one, IA being instruction associate. And that person will kind of act as a TA in most other college-based institutions equivalent, but they can also help side instruct as well, depending if you want to reverse shadow them or not later on in the course. So it's, again, up to you. I wouldn't in the foundations, at least doing Linux, but what you can also do is help them with that. In week 2, we do shell scripting basics, which is like Bash. We don't go into the actual specifics of Z shell or anything like that. We just kind of keep it generic. So you'll have like the general conditional statements and flows, file descriptors, pipings, and redirects are really going to hit home between day 3 and weeks 1 and 2. Distributions and building from source, they'll learn a little bit more about how code operates from source and linking, GCC compiler and whatnot. And they'll learn why we have high-level code versus low-level code, even seeing what machine code looks like, as well as assembly, all the way through C-level, and ultimately some sample of Python equivalent. Now, they'll see that concept again much later on when we get to Python foundations later on in the course, but you start them off with this now to give them expectation that they have it pretty good. And then you also teach them mostly, while you're teaching mostly in Ubuntu with Debian-based distribution, when they get to AWS using the AMIs, they're going to run into CentOS, which is or Red Hat type like distribution. So they need to really understand that there. We'll also go into systems hardening. So there's going to be a reoccurring thing that there's some sort of security standard in all these foundations, including the AWS Academy actual courseware. And that's because for those of you who are not AWS familiar, AWS is always job zero at AWS itself, as well as the how they approach customers and how they train others. And then, of course, at the end of week 2, you will have a quiz for Linux. That quiz looks something like this. So we go into the syllabus here. Now, the syllabus is not what you'll be accessing directly. There will be an interactive version of the quiz made available to you. And they'll have about 15 questions. And these are all multiple choice. For the students, these are open book, open note. And then, of course, it's timed as well. So basically, you have the ability to make sure that they understand what they need to understand without having to memorize everything in the world. And a very practical hands-on requirements. And if you notice, for those of you who have ever taken AWS-based certifications, they have very familiar type wordings and scenario-based needs, and there'll be screenshots in there accordingly. For some of you who are doing end-to-end instruction, including the AWS as well as the foundational content, you might have noticed your onboarding questions here look very familiar. And they are the same for that reason, because students are expected to know what you're expected to know, at least at a foundational level at the end of the course. Going back into the item here, we move forward to week 3 and onward. So device OSI concepts, routing and switching, pros and protocols. So basically, understanding OSI, where it all fits in. We go into like Wireshark and stuff like that. If you want to learn more about the course learning objectives, we have it right here in the spreadsheet as well. And it's really for understanding what you need to do, how packets work and transfer at a conceptual level. And remember, there's labs in every day. So days 1, 2, and 3, you always have a lab associated with it. And so you get to send the students out, explore on their own, and you'll bring them back in roughly 15 minutes before class ends for a wrap up and summary. And you'll do a knowledge check to make sure they were actually doing stuff in the lab. Who you set them with the lab and all the logistics there, just know that that is between you and the IA with you, and you can also rotate students out between each other as well. You want to have everyone work together at least once, and then eventually they'll formulate teams for their capstone. Also in Linux networking, we also talk about firewalls, stateful packet inspection, deep level packet inspection through this week as well. They even look at an IPS signature to understand what is being detected on and why it would be abnormal versus normal traffic. So they really understand things like TCP handshake, as well as the teardown, what is normal activity looking like, to help them really troubleshoot near the end towards day 3 of a common set of use case scenarios. Some might be reading logs, some of them might be understanding different aspects of a connection or a timeout. Is it normal to have a timeout versus a ICMP message error? And they'll get to look at the packet level. We move over to transitioning in week 5. So even though we have a huge blast of information there, they'll probably still be spending. So I can kind of give them a little bit of a smaller break week for the first half. So we have what are our cloud models, the IaaS, platform as a service, and SaaS. The well-architected framework and pillars. There's a lot of details there, but it conceptually is not as hard to pick up because a lot of it, when you read through it, makes a lot of sense. Saying, well, you do need to talk about resiliency, and you should have, multiple failover sites. Those are some of the best practices that are introduced, as well as security of the cloud and in the cloud. We also, in day 3, go into hybrid networking connectivity, so like pure VPCing in the labs, as well as being able to understand, are you connected to the VPC network or are you connected to your account? So we have a distinction with CLI and programming credentials as opposed to IP and network level connectivity. So that distinction is there on week 5. Also in week 6 is when we start picking back up again. We have a hard presence in IAM and migration practices with the 6 R's in terms of AWS. So everything is AWS focused and best practices. They should have their account already ready to go, week 5. Week 6 is when they'll start using it. And they're still using a lot of free and great items here. There's operational security best practices that also go with it. So I have a couple labs in there that show them how to use like cloud custodian and how to automate some remediation. That's kind of neat. Then I also have a quiz similar to what you saw on the previous networking and Python quizzes. Again, these are not what the students see, not what you'll see. You'll see them in the actual LMS. But I want to just show you that these are all multiple choice. And then they'll be converted to multiple choice or multiple selection, just like you would in the AWS actual quiz. Everything is 15 questions long. And then we'll have, for non-quiz modules, we'll have rubrics for how to grade different things built into the LMS. All right, and content type guided. If you see this here, guided means we have the fact that you're going through the same material that they're reading, but you'll also be doing like a recorded lecture each time. So each day you'll have a recorded lecture, except for the lab time, and you'll kind of jump into their different rooms and help them accordingly when and if they need help. And this tab, again, this is the reminder that you have a deliverable that week that you have to send out, and your IA will assist you accordingly if you have one. We also have the migration practices, again, best practices, and then you have your AWS specific quiz. Again, each of these quizzes are 15 questions long, open note, open book for these students. So they can have their different screens if necessary if they ask. Next, we're going to Python Foundations. We're using Python 3, so we'll do the very basics. We're not going too in depth into learning how to be a superstar in Python, but they need to be able to read code at the end as well as make basic functional code. And even if it's not the complete optimized way, they'll have to think about optimizing it later on as they go into their technical architectures when we get to the following weeks. So things like conditionals, if then else, so loops, variable settings, the dunder statement as well, building my first function. All those basics will be part of that. And of course, an overview of lots of different other comparisons to what Python is in the first day. Standard input and output, so you'll have like sending out to files, reading from files, and then of course the modularity with functions saying, can I import my own function and export a Python script as a library? And that's what they should have at the very end of week 8 there. Again, followed by the quiz of Python in week 8, and it's not a coding quiz, but it's a multiple choice where they have to read the code and understand if they were paying attention or if they grasp the concepts. They should have should be a pretty standard time. Weeks 9 and 10, we focus on Enterprise DevOps Foundations. So it's different from DevOps Associate from the AWS standpoint from the certificate side or the examination side. And this really focuses on what does DevOps actually mean from a conceptual basis? What kind of mentality? What does Agile mean to you? We talk about the sprints versus backlogs, whole stories around something, the whole idea of spike. If you haven't heard of that term before, hopefully you have. And then how to translate import code between each other. So sometimes you'll not only have everything due in Python. Maybe you have to take what you can read in C#.NET, for instance, and then figure out what the Python equivalent is. So they'll learn how to do some of that in the most basic standard. They also look for standardizing data, normalizing them. So CSVs, key value pairs come to mind, JSON objects versus random, grabbing from a unstructured data file, as well as getting to practice more of the regular expressions. So in the regular expressions, we kind of introduce those terms up into networking and Python, but we really don't get into it until we start going to normalizing data. And so we'll focus a lot on that as well. And then of course we have security code operations. So static code analysis tools, some people call them security linters. So things like Python's Bandit might be of assistance to you. And they'll learn how to create their own pipeline. So they'll use the AWS account. We'll also learn how to do, not actually create it in the labs, but also just be able to conceptually understand what the pipeline is for. Other technologies like Jenkins to actually orchestrate all of that, which is the code build tools. Maybe they'll use SonarQube with it. And it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish here. And then they understand all the differences already from weeks 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and foundations for Linux. They'll understand in virtualization actually in days 1 and 2 very quickly. Virtualization, including containerization, there's distinctive differences in between them. Weeks 11 through 14 is when we get into AWS Academy specific coursework. So that's a lot of learning objectives, and this is coming directly from their courseware here. There is no actual deliverable for the students. However, it's highly encouraged that they take the solutions architect associate level. So at the time of this recording, this is SAA-C02. And again, you are guiding that. So instead of the actual Fullstack Academy material itself that's created by me, this will be the actual AWS Academy branded ones. For those of you who are only teaching up to foundations, this is where you end and you pass off. And hopefully you have a transitional class time to introduce the new instructor if you are coming aboard and teaching the AWS material itself. Again, this is all focused on solutions architect associate level. So those of you that are teaching the AWS side, you know you have to have these certifications up to date. The onboarding process for that is making sure that you're nominated through the university partner that you'll be teaching that cohort for, and then you might have a kickoff call with the AWS business development team for that partnership at that point. Once you're approved, you'll have access to the material itself, and you definitely want to maintain your certification all throughout the time that you're teaching that level of course. Material again will be provided to you in terms of PowerPoint format, so you'll have very similar items to the internal instructor-led courseware and other routines in there. So you're more than welcome to supplement where you want to, but you want to stick closely towards the courseware as part of the academic requirements and term agreements. Around week 15, that's when we kind of introduce the idea that you're going to have a end of they won't be surprised because you're supposed to have this introduction before class starts or cohort starts, but the capstone is when we start kicking off. So we'll create some team assignments. We'll let them formulate their own scope and things that they want to do. Over here on this tab here, you'll see what we expect them to do in this week. So there's still a lot to do. At the end of the week, the weekend, we want them to have a technical architecture, something visual, a data flow diagram, and the approval as an MVP level. And you really want them to have preferably something that works within AWS, because you cannot approve anything because that is non-related to AWS. It's one, it's cheaper, two, it's faster, and three, it's the focus of this course. So it really aligns and ties in. So if they want to do something that's still on their local host, they should have a really good reason why they're not leveraging the cloud. And hopefully they've learned that the best practices and all the great things that come with the cloud, at least with AWS level of technology, you can convince them otherwise. Otherwise, there should be a really good reason not to, or maybe they only need to use a certain core aspect of an AWS service that they want to bring locally. Make sure you keep that in mind. Lots of students have different interpretations of how much they want to use AWS for. So as long as I can explain a business use case, that might be grounds for approving to their MVP level. Week 16 through 19, then as they're thinking about this in the background, you kind of remind them that we're going to background that, but they still need to get it done if they didn't for that week. They jump right into AWS DevOps associate level, and at the end, again, time of this recording, DVA-C01 is the certification exam, optional but recommended. And this is where they kind of come in to get the AWS's feel. So we extend on what we talked about in the Enterprise DevOps Foundations 2 weeks here, and really going towards, well, what does that mean, and how do you translate that into the AWS version? So what blue-green means to some people elsewhere outside means something different, and there's blue-green deployment strategy scenarios with linear progression as well as with straight-up cutover, and that will be on their certification exam. So you got to make sure that you help them distinct and connect the dots together. What is the enterprise that you might see with teams struggling or completely doing it on their own without the cloud? And then what does AWS need and require from it for you? So make sure you distinct all those different experiences together in those anecdotes accordingly. Over here, I've listed the actual exam domains here, which this coursework does teach you towards. Same exact thing. The coursework material will be provided to you directly from AWS Academy. Now, it's one thing I'll take a pause here. When you refer to things inside your recorded instruction, you always want to refer to something as AWS versus Amazon versus AWS Academy. They are very, very picky about this. How do I know? I came from AWS. So when you refer to something that is related to AWS Academy's coursework, related to AWS Academy. When something's related to AWS services, such as AWS's IAM, S3 or something like that, refer it accordingly. Do not call it Amazon. Amazon is a parent company, but not AWS. As we move forward, the next phase of the capstone will have dedicated time to work on it. So they should be working on things in the background in the end. And then they'll have dedicated weeks to kind of make sure they are in sync. So week 20 is when we have you want to make sure that you have the right prototyping and you have your dev environment already set up, as well as a pitch and a mock interview from someone in the the student success side. And then you have practically the rest of the week to work on the actual project itself. They also want to do a development environment. So again, if they want to use like Cloud 9 or something, or the VS Code locally, and if they decide to use SSO or programmatic keys, that's on them. But whatever they decide to do, it has to be functional with the team. The team should be able to collaborate in near real time. Their tools, such as the standard Gits and stuff like that, should be in a repo, should all be ready to roll and good to go. So you might want to help inspect that around day 2 and day 3 to make sure that they're on the right path. Weeks 21 through 24, again, is related to AWS SysOps administrator. So at the time, again, of this writing is SOA-C01. However, there's a C02 coming out sometime in mid to late 2021, which might be a little bit different. So the AWS Academy courseware is usually up to date. However, keep in mind with students that are going to take the optional certification, they have to know some hands-on CLI. So if they're not very familiar with their constructs or their CLI information there, you remind them that they need to be hands-on if they're going to be taking it closer to August and beyond. Again, makes use of SysOps associate administrator level, so it really helps them prepare later on. Once they get enough ramp up time and years under experience, it'll make it easier for them to get the DevOps engineer level certification, post cohort, not immediately after, but after the cohort is completed. There's also going to be a career success LinkedIn workshop, which can take roughly about an hour is the estimate that they can do so in between. So, we're getting to a point where we need to start thinking about their careers, and they should really be working with the career success management team on mock interviews, resume writing, things of that nature. And that's a parallel tandem workflow than what you see here. This is all academic focus, which you'll be focused on. However, you'll have times where you need to bring someone in to have a brief discussion about the careers in between some of this stuff. Okay, so the final weeks, 25 and 26, it's all capstone. So we start them off a little bit earlier. We want them to get really thinking about it, make sure they'll be successful. And we want them to really have really good working solutions, not actual just hello world print statements, obviously. And so the main thing is we want them in the full DevOps methodology. So we don't want them to just willy-nilly deploy code without some sort of pipeline. Right? One of the key cornerstones at completion is change control, security analysis, build testing cases, and integration tests. So if you're wondering what did they learn how to do that, some of it's taught inside the actual DevOps associate level. But remember, the DevOps associate level kind of gives the AWS spin on everything. So we'll cover weeks 9 and 10, going back in here. Understanding partially on porting code is understanding the test cases and procedures, including the source code operations. So secure code and best practices and source code operations will probably have the test cases and integration cases that you're looking for. Now, along with the capstone projects, we also have on weeks 26 buffer days. So there could be up to 4 buffer days, depending on their vacation and the time of your cohort. The graduation days, a non-work day. So you have buffer days in case the students want to have extra learning. The subjects are here accordingly in the topics, which you can elect to choose depending on their level. It's all up to you. However, here's a suggested solution here. So during foundations, which is usually when they're probably mentally ready or academically ready between 5 and 10 weeks in, the AWS CDK and Terraform introduction might make sense. So infrastructure as code, the whole best practices around that. During the rest of the buffer days, something might make a little bit more sense during Solutions Architect Associate, especially when they have some of these questions on the actual exam itself. Things like exponential backoff and throttling. And then, of course, working backwards from code. So if you here, that's more all deployed like Ian McKay's tool sets or AWS Recorder, Scout 2 or something of that nature. And then you can actually take interesting items. He has a little macro script that is an extension plugin, which you'll see right here. And you can actually take whatever you have in the account already and convert it back into the CloudFormation or Terraform, or even CDK. It's quite neat. The other one here is security automation with AWS. So this is kind of an extension of what they did in the lab. So focused around not just maybe AWS config and my first Lambda for remediation and SNS topic, but also focused around true automatic remediation. And Cloud Custodian was mentioned at some point in the lab. They'll write their own scripts and do some more stuff with Cloud Custodian. Again, that's a third-party tool, not one of AWS native, but it's actually cheaper and developed by one of our AWS customers, Capital One. So that's it for this spreadsheet. I also want to show you some of the resources that are part of this guided portion of it. So the content type says guided. You also have some decks that you can go through. And that deck corresponds with your actual lecture plan. So for each module I have for you a lecture plan, you don't have to follow it to the T, but you should use it as a structural guideline for yourself. And I've also included checks right here, like questions that you should ask students as knowledge checks, and make sure you pace yourself accordingly. Here's a suggested schedule. Again, this is your class, this is your cohort, control accordingly. But keep in mind that constant breaks make a lot of sense, and depending and maybe giving them a walkthrough. And the more they learn and stay hands-on and engaged, the breaks may help. The easier it is for them to retain as well. And of course, also is the lab tasks and general steps. I don't include the actual step-by-steps. That's actually in a different instructor-facing document. So you'll use the lecture plan in tandem with your slides, so you can actually present directly here. And I have recordings of that right here. So you can actually watch these as samples. Some of them go from anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. It depends on the content itself and how you want to display it. Here is where I have a threat model. Last but not least, I want to devote your attention a little bit to the workshop guide. So the workshop guide is something for those of you who are full stack existing instructors. You have everything inside the Learn Dot modules, which is the LMS. Going forward in the DevOps course, students will have access to what's called Canvas as their LMS. So for instructors, you'll be working out of here. Hopefully you'll be trained inside Canvas. Make sure you work with your onboarding team for that, or your manager. And you'll open up courses and based on modules, and then different pages are part of modules for each of those sections. That this is an example, Linux. It includes quizzes, which has this information, as well as the rubrics on how to make sure that you have the scoring criteria, and then you have gradings in the chat. So all this, when you interact with students, will be in Canvas. This is what it looks like, and then of course you'll have each course for each of your cohorts accordingly, depending on what your onboarding requirements are. And then if the students drill down, they'll be seeing most of this as their homepage maybe. And then this is the example course. All this is inside your workshop guide. So this is actually the whole course per section. So there's an AWS Foundations section, a Python one, an Enterprise DevOps one, a networking one, a Linux one, and of course the different ones for AWS Solutions Architects Associates. So these are all going to cover foundations, but not the AWS Academy courseware. That's as is and cannot be modified. Don't mind these over here. These are in QA right now at the time of this recording with the Zovio technology team. But do note that we have labs, the solution information in there, as well as the deep level knowledge and the same knowledge that you'll see on the actual pages. How you teach and how much you extract here is up to you. You have to manage your time management accordingly. But I have everything here that you should need, just like a student would read. So you can actually read through all of this and then prepare for your classes that way. Again, you'll have access to this or a copy of this. This is a sample date timeline. So for those of you who are looking at this recording much later on or backwards facing, these are just sample timelines. These are by week. So we have multiple phases in here, but mostly you're just worried about the different sections: Linux Foundations, networking, AWS Foundations, Python, Enterprise DevOps Foundations, and then followed by the AWS Academy and capstone related courseware. And that's it for now. So hopefully you found this a useful demonstration. If you have any sort of questions, reach out to your mentor assigned to you, or you can always reach out to me, dennis.chow@fullstackacademy.com. I can answer some of the questions related to the content itself, or redirect you to someone who might help you if it is related to operational items. So always try to check with your manager first or your mentor first, and then reach out to me if you can't find anything else. Again, thank you for your time, and hope to see you soon.